Hello and welcome to another episode of Fulbrighters for Disability Inclusion. I'm your host, Samar Naqvi, and today we have with us Miss Khaula Rizwan. Khaula went on her Fulbright to Boston University for a master's in special education. She is an educational consultant and a social transformational leader alongside being a disability advocate. She initiated Khaula Rizwan Consultancy to offer mentoring related to disability, higher education, and international scholarships. She currently consults with corporates, nonprofits, and universities for more inclusive communication during hiring, testing, and admissions for people with disabilities. Khaula, it's a pleasure to have you today with us and welcome.
Thank you so much, Summer. I think the work you're doing is amazing. I love the title of this podcast as well. I think that we are all working in disability landscape in one mode or other. So I'm really excited to be here. Thank you.
Lovely, lovely. So we're going to jump straight into it, right? Tell us a little bit about what all you've been involved in, what all you've been doing, and perhaps walk us through your lived experience with a disability and how you had to kind of combat challenges within Pakistan, and then potentially even speak about what experiences you had during your Fulbright.
Okay. That's not a tough one anymore because when you have lived through one challenge after another challenge, you somehow get the hang of it. And then the attitude, I feel it's not just for people with disability. People without disability, they go through their own battles. But how we react to a situation, how we respond, it tells a lot about our education and lived experience as well. So my whole life has been figuring out where am I fitting in, where I belong, and all that. About me, I have a lived experience of someone who was born deaf. I was about 4 years old when my parents understood that I had a hearing loss. I had to go through an audiomyopathy. It's like severe, profound loss, and it was that we were hearing it and get speech therapy from early childhood. And then from there, my parents were living in two different worlds because we were the first one in the entire family. And it's not just me, I have two other siblings who are also hard of hearing, and my elder sibling is hearing. So that dynamic, one hearing,
Mm.
me hard of hearing sister, and for my parents, they were wondering, should we use sign language? Should we get special school accommodation or what? They were figuring out so much, and it was in Hyderabad, not very developed city. So thankfully, one of my aunts moved to Lahore, and she figured out that if they need to have a life of their own, if they were able to grow up and like be independent, they can be in a deaf school. Because one of the doctors said that deafness is like it's not a one size fits all. Deafness is a spectrum, like autism is a spectrum. So with deafness, you can be completely deaf and not be able to speak, and you have to accommodate sign language, written touch, or visual something. But for us, we were able to speak a little, hear a little, we could grow and do that. So we were living in two different worlds at the same time. But for my parents, more than my parents, I think our ancestors, like grandparents, their siblings and their sisters and brothers, they treated us like any other child in the family, you know. They provided extra care and love. They didn't make us feel that, okay, something is different about them. I think that internalization is so important in early childhood, that love and feeling of you don't have to belong, be who you are. And that's how I grew up. And I felt like I'm so blessed to have that love and care because where I'm now, I'm in the educational consultancy space. I feel it was always my calling. You know, the universe tells you that you need to stop thinking about yourself, start working for other students because society is going to demoralize you with so much attitude, so many challenges. They are going to confuse you about who you should be as a deaf
Mm,
person. They're going to tell you how you should live your life. I know someone, they do this, you should try that. Instead of empowering them to figure out your own potential to lead your own life or earn in your own way. So that feeling, I thought I was meant for the corporate world. I understood that Telenor was a really good company, but somehow the universe keeps telling me that you need to go out in those communities because they're really struggling. When you really feel passionate about something, you forget about yourself because when I see my siblings with other teachers or professors, I don't think there's any hidden loss here. It's just that we are able to do, frankly speaking, a lot of things on our own now. We are all in 30, younger than we have children and all. But when I see my children, they are literally struggling. They're not taught that my educational consistency cannot be just for making money or getting an admission for someone. I need to talk about what is not being taught in Pakistan, and that's a
mm,
disability inclusion. It's just a big word. It's so difficult to be inclusive. Like the simple question someone asked, how can we be inclusive? I'm trying to talk with you about how can we make you feel inclusive. So that is a
yeah,
very big question here.
yeah, yeah. No, for sure, for sure. And there's so many things in your answer that make me want to go in few different directions. But the one thing that you spoke about was that sense of belonging, right? Um, in as a part of an inclusive society, and we've read time and again when we read through history, we also realize that the tribes that survived in the world weren't the smartest, weren't the strongest, weren't the bravest. They were the ones that
Yeah.
banded together, the ones that stuck together, the ones that had that unity,
Yes.
that unison, that they could work inclusively. So inclusion becomes almost like a necessary thing to do as opposed to like a good thing to do, right? So speaking of, how important have these, and I know we spoke a little bit about challenges, but how important is the role of some of the support factors, some of the bits that you did have that got you through, that created that resilience? So the factors that were there during your upbringing and as you grew up, for you to develop that resilience? What were some of those, if you would like to share?
Yeah. So I think having a diagnosis helps a lot, like the correct diagnosis. Like in your earlier podcast, so many people talk about misdiagnosis or non-diagnosis. It's like a double-edged sword, having that label and diagnosis. It can fall back on you and make you feel discriminated against, but it will also work in your favor. People want to talk about it. They will ask questions which will be offending to you, but your job is to educate them. So I say living with that diagnosis, we did not focus too much on the labeling because when we were in
Mm,
Lahore Grammar School, nobody said, okay, you're deaf, you're hard of hearing. We just wrote, like my late father, he used to say, like Abu used to say, okay, I have three daughters, they all have a hearing impairment. He used to label that word often. And I used to tell them, that label is not important. Instead, it's just for admission purpose, it's for accommodation purpose. If you need support, you need to be like swallow up your pride and request support. It's not that easy living with that label around you. But for myself, I was like, I'm just like you, I don't need the label. But that diagnosis really helped because every 2 years we need to get a hearing test just to figure out if we are losing our hearing more because every year you can lose your hearing, but it also helps that you maintain your hearing loss over the year. That
mm,
feeling of little bit independence, don't use too much loud music, don't expose yourself to thunderstorms and all that. That little support my parents really helped a lot with all of it. They didn't have a background in that education or all that. They just had this experience from birth, figuring out from different audiology. They were in a very small town. But when we moved to Lahore, only one audiologist who came back from the UK, he said, let them feel normal. Don't even use the word normal. Just be normal with them. Yes, you need to work out areas where therapy is needed. So early intervention helps. But the therapy was getting very expensive, and I mean, it happened with me. They were forcing me to pronounce the letter again and again. And I was thinking, what is wrong with me? I was feeling bad about myself. When I grew up, I understood that if I'm not hearing that letter from birth, how can I speak that letter? That's why I have a struggle with S or school. It's not clear. My speech is not clear. But working around what you can do over what you can do. That's strength-based model in our family, education. And then when we started building our career, my younger sister, her career was very small. She knew she wanted to be a visual artist, and being in the arts, you can be expressive, you don't have to communicate a lot, you can be your chance. But for me, I was figuring out, okay, I need to be in the medical sector. I love working with patients. But then I realized, oh, I can be a doctor in Pakistan. And I was like, okay, this is a lot. I changed my career so many times. I was lost. Naturally, I fell into a depression too. But that experience over the time, but that you either fight the system or the system fights you. You have a choice in whatever you do. So that fight, challenge, like navigating your way around challenge. Okay, I know I can take up a phone call. What can I do? Finding out option, finding out alternative. My brain has been wired to look at the whole picture and to find out alternative that works for me, and it will not work for you, Bobby. But if it works for me, it means over the years you learn to be independent. You understand that people will give you attitude, the bank and the ATM, they will be inaccessible for you for those who have a visual challenge. You may not be able to cross the road because there are no dams, there are no curb cuts, so you need support from it. There are going to be challenges. But when I went on the Fulbright program, that was my mission, that I am such an introvert, and who are all these leaders? What do you mean by leaders? Who are all these people who made that Americans with Disability Act? They they had a march on the Capitol Hill. They left their wheelchair, and I learned so much activism. That spirit of activism, I felt like, sometimes it's just spark that Fulbright experience helped me a lot with being worker. Like, that is wrong. You can't do that. I
Beautiful, beautiful. So yeah, I mean, quite a journey. And you know how you made that distinction between what you can do and what you can't do, and then figure it out, work it out. And you did so. So that's a beautiful story around like resilience as well, and something to learn from. And Khala, I observe, I hear you say a couple of words around terminology. So you mentioned hard of hearing, you mentioned hearing impairment, you also mentioned deaf. And we've heard these terms floating around, we've read these terms. What is the conclusion to this conversation? How much do words matter? And how important is it to kind of standardize, pick a word, and then address it? Because sometimes a large portion of conversation just remains around terminology and words, but I also understand their significance. So your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I remember talking about terminology because I will be honest with you. Until 2 years ago, I was educating people a lot on the right terminology to use. Say I'm hard of hearing, not deaf. I don't like the word that because it implies or it means that I can't hear. And then they just stamp on me that, oh, Khaula is deaf, you can't work, you can't do a job, you can't meet people. So that stamp was working negatively. So I was like, I'm hard of hearing. I was trying to dumb it down and make you feel that I can hear you and all that. But then over the years, I will be very honest with you, I wasn't doing a very good job myself. When I was educating people, I was focusing, arguing too much on the correct labeling, correct thing. Then COVID happened and we were all working from home. I had to build my network online because I had no people to meet me. So I went on LinkedIn and I found my another tribe there, an international group of activists who were, the language about disability. The very good part about this language is it's a language. It's evolved. You have to keep up with the current trend. You also have to remember we are the after effects of colonial hangover. So we have to move and evolve. So just as disability at one time it was considered a bad word. Now we understand it's not a bad word. It really depends what you are comfortable with. A very good way of using the correct language is not to worry about the language you are using, but how you address someone with a disability. Also, just ask them, how do you prefer being called? If they say you can call me anything, then you don't have to worry. But this language part is that in the disability inclusion, any initiative or when we are talking about employment, the problem with this language is that the terminology is that it stops you from thinking about way forward from there. It's like I would rather not talk about my disability, but what I can do on the job with you and how you can support me as an employer. That's why over the past few months I have been reached out by many friends and fellows who say we have a candidate with experience disability. I don't know how to go on about it. Should I just reject them? And I say, no, just go on with the interview. And then they worry about the questions, the language and the term, all valid questions, all valid feelings. But I share them recommendation that keep it informational. It's your opportunity to experience what it's been like to do inclusive hiring. You are doing it. It will always you talk about it, but you never act on it. So now your opportunity to act. I think less about the terminology and more about the action, accommodation, support, communication, feeling of empathy. We need to empathize with them. So I think we are now heading towards that. I'm not sure where Pakistan is. I feel we are somewhere in between. There's a lot of awareness, lots of advocacy going on, like your work at with Karachi Down syndrome, and so many Fulbrighters, they are advocating as well. So the language is evolving.
There's hope. There is definitely
They
hope.
hope, yes, they hope, yes. Finally, after a very long time, especially now I'm in my 30s, and I'm like, it took us more than 15, 17 years. We just had a disability law passed for people with dyslexia. Dyslexia is a learning disorder where your writing and reading is affected. Previously, people who have dyslexia, they couldn't drive, they couldn't go to job, and it had your reading and writing has has an effect on when you drive and you can't read the sign properly. It will affect your processing with the driving as well. And even when I drive, people say, "Oh, you can't drive, you can't hear the sound and horn," and I'm like, I'm working with alternatives. Remember, alternatives, what we can do here.
I think
Yeah,
that's the way to think. That's a lovely way to think. As in, not what there is a lack of or a limitation in, but how we can plug in alternatives or find solutions together,
yeah,
ways to support
yeah.
each other. Um, so yeah, so Khala, I mean, coming to a little bit about you as a person, and we'd like to know a little bit more. And perhaps you want to share what drives you, how you find hope some of the happy moments, some of the joyous moments that you've had during your 30 plus years you mentioned. I'm just using what you said.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, please share, because I feel like it's important to talk about some of the happy moments too, while we also speak about some of the things that we can work on.
Yeah. A lot of my happy moments came from childhood. We had a carefree childhood. I like to use that word. We didn't have a toxic environment, so we had fun, like lots of fun. We hung out with cousins and siblings. But there's something about people who they forget that if you are growing up, your child is also growing up with you. Your inner child is growing up with you.
Yeah,
And that's personal for me, and hopefully it will help you also keep humor with you. Like, I know life can get very difficult, very challenging. Overnight, your life can change. But something that really drives me is I love using humor just to diffuse the situation, and also I make fun of my own hearing loss aspect. I people
yeah.
are like, "Okay, are you playing the disability card here, or
Mhm,
are you doing
mhm.
this?" And they get confused. So I like doing that. And
Yeah,
it's like you see all this happen in the movie. People are using sign language, and then there's
yeah,
a comedy, and I'm saying, "Hey, that's not the sign for coffee. Coffee is like this. We're doing this like this." Lots of fun. Humor and humor about disability. You have to be a little bit respectful about that. But for me, these are the happiest moments because when I was in the US, I met so many different people. They look up to you, you look up to them, and that feeling of hope that I know the US is ahead. It's miles ahead. But if they are where they are, it's because people fought and joined together for a single movement. A lot of people can do that in Pakistan too. You don't have to have an education and special education or deaf education. You just have to have this really fundamental awareness about what it feels like to live with the challenge or disability, like the conversation we are having, the podcast. And the Fulbright network is really helped me find my friends after a really long time. I found those friends who challenge me when I become too sensitive about my hearing loss. And they're like, "Hey, you're bigger than this. You know, we are just having fun with you." And
yeah,
then over time, they figure out, okay, what part of the movie I will not be able to get. They put on the closed caption for me, and then
yeah,
they stopped going to cinema as well because they say, hey, we can have closed caption movie night at home. Why bother going to cinema? So for me, these are the happiest moments. Like, oh, hey, I see people finally getting me. Like, I don't have to explain any longer who I am. It's becoming like it's fitting in, like the universe is coming together. And after COVID, I had to leave my full-time job and work from home. Before that, it was not working for me. I had
yeah,
a really bad experience, but I prayed a lot to Allah that if I'm leaving something, there might be another thing I'm not looking at. I
yeah,
know we all know when one door opens, the other door closed, but I couldn't figure out, okay, which door am I looking at? There's
yeah,
no door.
yeah, yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
that's not, if it's funny, there's no door. So, a very wise scholar, they told us that when you are confused where the door is, make your own door.
Mm,
That's how I started my consultancy from scratch.
wonderful,
Yeah.
wonderful, wonderful. Really nice. Um, and uh, and you said something about the the friends that you've made along the way, the ones that challenge you. Um, because there is also this phenomena that we read about where people with disabilities sometimes
Yeah.
develop learned helplessness, where when people facilitate them, over facilitate them, they sometimes do not realize their own potential because they may not be
Yeah.
incapable, but people make them feel and believe that they are. And that's why they develop that learned helplessness. So it's super important to have individuals around you who can challenge you, who can help you grow, who do not stifle your growth in any which way. So I'm very happy to hear that, Khaula. And just as we conclude, I just want to speak a little bit about what your thoughts are around um, some of the some of the things that we need to do in this disability inclusion landscape. What are some of the things that you would recommend for every individual to kind of do? And if you were to kind of pick the top three things to be worked on within this landscape so that we can promote, grow inclusion even more so.
Okay. I think that highly depends what kind of disability or challenge it is, because then it's called in the disability theory. We have different models to understand the disability, how you put the disability in context. For example, if you have a child with a progressive visual blindness, like the doctor said that they are going to lose their blindness over the years, they're going to get worse, they might lose their vision completely. If it's from birth, that experience, how you respond and work with them, it's very different compared to someone who received a diagnosis midlife. They had an accident, they got paralyzed, and they are now using a wheelchair to mobilize, like for mobility, they are using a wheelchair. That experience is different. And then elderly population or expectant mothers who have bedridden, their experience is different. They are temporarily disabled. So in the disability community, we say one size does not fit all.
Yeah.
But it really depends that sometimes a disability can be very severe. Sometimes you can do a lot of things for them. But for example, someone who has cerebral palsy, they are not able to hold a full-time job. They need lots of accommodation. They have chronic health issues and all that. I think the basic thing is really understanding their limitation, like accepting that there's a limitation. I think part of the conversation we don't have, accepting is the number one thing. Accept that you have a limitation. I have accepted it. It took me a really long time that if I can do a phone call, I can do a job. And then people like, there's so many different jobs you can do. I said, no, every job requires a phone call. That was my limitation. And it's just a psychological limitation. And then I grew up with that limitation. Yeah, I can't do a job because phone call. And that happened. My first week job, I really suffered because I couldn't tell the employer that if I can't do a phone call, how about someone make a phone call on my behalf? You're in my team, you can do that as well. You can relate to me, let me know what we're talking about. Except then number two is communication, the doctor, the medical world. Unfortunately, it has been a very good prediction on the part of doctor. They are not the best judge of eligibility. That's what I've seen. Because if they say you can't walk anymore, I have seen people walking. If they say you're going to lose your hearing completely, I have seen people not lose their hearing.
Yeah.
And it's like miracles happen. But early support really helps. If you know what someone is, just better of having, like, there is a chance that they are going to struggle with communication or there's an autism or something like that. Instead of worrying too much on the label, start the process, like get really good team of therapists, interventionists, and there's lots of counseling involved. I mean, for parents, for new parents, it's that trauma that something was wrong with me. I gave birth to a child with a disability, and now I'm in Pakistan. It's not exactly friendly, but a lot happens with how parents are given counseling. Like when they respond to other people having a disability, like an adult or a role model,
Yeah.
like very young children, they see me. I've taught them at non-government organizations,
Yeah.
and they're like, I can't believe I'm finally seeing a young adult or a full grown up and very hearing
Yeah.
aid, and I'm wearing hearing aid. Why did it take me 10 years of my life to finally meet you? So that's role model. That's why I encourage all of you to volunteer because you might never know who you are going to connect with, like on a deeper level. It's not
Yes.
about just hearing it. It's like maybe you have a blindness or maybe you have a communication, you have a stutter, you have a limb disorder, and they will be able to connect with you. So I think inclusion is not a one-man job or one-woman job. We all have to come together and meet midway. We do that.
Wonderful, wonderful. You covered quite a few points there. You talked about communication, talked about alternatives, diagnosis being correct, having role models. I think that's a hugely important variable that's often missed out on because participation of people with disabilities, children with disabilities in the mainstream, whether at schools, growing up, I think that kind of changes up the space a lot for understanding each other and breaking those barriers. Just finally, Khaula, any final comments, any pearls of wisdom, anything you want to share with our audiences, or you want to talk a little bit about inclusion, sending a message? The floor is yours.
Yeah. I think I will have lots of final comments. I have lots of advices. Yeah, that's a simple one. Don't aim for perfection. If you do that, even if you don't have a disability, because of COVID, I have realized that so many new syndromes are coming up, like the imposter syndrome, and people are having so much self-doubt about their ability, whether or not they will get an admission or the scholarship, or my child will grow up to be a normal human being. Like, there is no perfect line, there is no perfect life. You are going to go through a tough life before you can have an easy life. Or you will have an easy life and then you have a tough life. It's like this.
Yeah.
But you have to find your tribe. It's really important to meet like-minded people. Even if it's just one person, someone who will not sympathize with you. I grew up with sympathetic people and I feel like you need to be around those people and don't be afraid of getting negative feedback. That really helps. If I'm not speaking in a good manner, I have to receive that feedback in order to grow. But there is no perfection with that. I think society is aiming for too much perfection. I think that logic is changing. But every person's life is going to be different. Even if there are two people with deafness or two people with autism, their own life will be different because their parents' upbringing, their community, their wealth, their health, all of these variables are entirely different for the two persons. So yeah, don't aim for perfection.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well said. And given your sense of humor and your personality, I'm sure you have plenty of people in your tribe. Was a pleasure having you today, Khaula. Thank you for taking the time. And you take care.
Thank you so much. I hope this project will be like a really tiny hope for you that my life was not easy. Disability sometimes it's not easy. It's going to be really challenging. It will take some time for you to finally accept that you have ADHD or you have autism. I have seen women in Pakistan owning that diagnosis, like there's a whole group in Islamabad who are now receiving a diagnosis midlife. Like they say we are autistic, but I don't know if I should use that word, and I haven't tapped into that network yet, but I'm planning to do that. My job is not done yet. I still have a lot to do. But thank you for having me here. Great job, Shamba.
Thank you. You take care.
Thank
Goodbye.
you.
Hafiz.